Everything should be working. So hello everyone. If something is not working, just let me know in the comments. Today we are having a guest, Sky, which is a really cool thing because I remember I used to watch him. I used to watch his videos on YouTube 8 years ago, and I be jealous about his like Templar piece that later I will show. So hello, Nicholas.
Hi,
A
how are you?
pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So now I will just like roll a small gallery of his artworks that I collected. Yeah, are stationed in different other pages. So if you could just tell us something about yourself
Yeah, let
and
me let me load up your stream because I'm still just looking at you through Skype. But I need to actually go on the stream to watch so I know which
yeah, now
pieces.
it's like just images going, so you don't need to talk about them later. It will go.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty much all. Yeah, so like tell your story. Where are you
Uh,
from? How you started art
sure,
and everything.
sure. So, I've talked about this a bit on my old YouTube videos, but I don't. I'm more than happy to go over it here as well. So I started doing digital art.
Hmm?
Let's see. I think well, if we want to go way back, I started learning how to use Photoshop in 2001. So I've been using Photoshop for a long time now. It's been about 20 years, which makes me feel very old. And I don't feel like I'm that old, but it makes me feel old. Um, so I started working in Photoshop in 2001 as well as Illustrator. I feel like they were pretty young back then. I don't remember exactly when Photoshop came out, but I think I was working in like Photoshop 6 or something.
Hmm.
Uh, but I started working sort of semi-professionally in 2007. When I was in college, I started doing freelance work for sort of like these game studios and whatnot. Mostly just kind of people who had some cash and ideas, but didn't really follow through a lot of the time. Because I mean, when you're getting into the industry, like you're kind of you don't have a name yet, so you kind of have to get in where people are desperate, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So that's where I started. And then I started working as a part-time freelancer. Well, I guess for some context, I graduated from college in 2009, and I did not go to an art school. I
Hmm.
was going to be pre-med originally, so I was studying biology, and chemistry, and whatnot
Oh.
at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. And I realized part of the way through it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I started. I was actually supposed to be a double major. I was pre-med in classics. Classics is like Latin, ancient Greek, stuff like that.
Nice.
So like I'm fully fluent and I can translate ancient Latin, some medieval Latin. Um,
Wow.
but anyway, I started talking to counselors and advisors about it, and it seemed like if I did medicine, I wasn't going to be able to start working until I was around 35. So
The school
two
is like
years.
extremely long for medical
Yeah,
stuff,
like
right?
I'd be starting work if I'd stayed pre med, I'd be starting work in 2 years from now. So I still wouldn't have been working. And then if I was going to go into classics, the only route you can go is to become a PhD and become a professor. And if you do that, there are limited seats available in the country, and I mean in the world as well to teach. So you
Hmm.
pretty much have to wait for someone to die. And then and I mean it sounds really grim, but that's the truth. Like you actually have to
uh,
wait for an old professor to die or retire because they're not going anywhere. So I decided I didn't want to do that, and I was pretty passionate about games and art at that point. So I talked to my professor in computer science. I was taking Intro to Maya at the time, and she recommended that I check out the Savannah College of Art and Design and go into video games. So I did that, and ironically, I didn't go into art once again. I thought there was too much competition in the concept art world.
mhm.
And I mean, this was 2009, so there was a lot of good talent coming out. This is like when like Darken was really big and stuff.
Yeah, but the
Um,
competition I don't think was there back then.
yeah. But yeah, I decided to be a game designer because I was like, well, anyone can be a game designer, so it'll be easier. And I've played a lot of games, blah blah blah. But anyway, I got an internship at Wizards of the Coast, and I went out there and I started working
Mhm.
on Magic the Gathering, doing like testing and puzzle design for Duels of the Planeswalkers. And then when I was there, I happened to have sent my portfolio to two of the art directors in the studio,
Mhm.
and I was doing some playtesting of a deck for Magic, because I mean, my job was literally I'd play Magic the Gathering for 8 hours a day. Like that's all I did.
Nice.
And I know some people are like, "Wow, that's the best job ever," but trust me,
I can
after a while, you're
imagine
like,
it
"This is a
being
lot of
tiring.
Magic."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Um, but anyway, yeah. So I'm gonna start sketching while I'm
Uh-huh.
talking, so it's not just
Yeah.
dead
Also,
visuals.
I will only interrupt you for like a second. If
Yeah.
anyone is like not following Nicolas C's work, just go to his Instagram. It's in here. Also, recently, and also I guess this will be a huge topic for today, or at least a
Oh
part of
yeah.
the topic is a Rarible and all the NFT, all of the thingies. So if any of you would like to own a piece done by Nicolas, the link to Rarible is in the description down below. So also this is how it looks. So just it will be a cool way to support him as an artist, and we will go to the live stream and everything, so we can see how he sketch and everything. So
Thanks for the
but,
plug. I appreciate it.
yep. And so basically for your clients, because you had or you still have, I guess, some pretty big like clients at the moment. Can you tell us what you were working for apart from like Magic?
Well, so I've actually never done art for a Magic card, which is the big irony. Because when I was there, I was working on Magic the Gathering, doing design and stuff. And then the art directors at the studio were like, "Why are you doing game design?" They came down and they talked to me. They're like, "You shouldn't be doing game design. You should be doing art, obviously. Like your portfolio is too good to be a game designer. This is a waste of time." So that was very flattering, and I did do some concept art for D&D and whatnot back then when I was in the studio. But if anyone else was trying to get a job around 2009 to 2011, you'll remember the Great Recession in the United States happened with the housing bubble. And it was very hard to find a job. So I tried to find a job for, and hopefully this is inspiring or comforting or whatever for people nowadays because it's hard to find work. But I tried to find a job for about, I think it was about 2 years, like in the like an industry in the job in the studio job, and I couldn't get a call back anywhere. The most I was offered was I was considered for a job in California, which was going to pay me $20,000 a year. And just so people have like some context, like that is not even close to cost of living. So I was going to have to have like 8 roommates and take a train or public transportation.
In what part of America are you living in?
Right now I'm in North Carolina.
And back then it was?
Back then I was living in Boston, Massachusetts, which is the Northeast. But the studio was in, I think it was in San Rafael or San Diego in California.
Okay.
Which
Because
is
like I'm only really familiar, I maybe not really familiar, but with the prices around like New York or something like this. So how the prices looked in Boston?
So California is very expensive. I'd say it's comparable. I believe San Francisco is the most expensive city in the country right now, especially with all the turmoil going on in New York City. But yeah, New York City and San Francisco kind of like jostle for who is the most expensive at any point. So like you'll hear about like those people who work at Google and they like live in the parking lot because they can't afford to live in the city. So like they'll have like motorhomes and something. They'll live in the parking lot and like they'll use the gym site, the gym that's in the studio to like take showers and bathe and stuff because they can't afford an apartment. But anyway, so I tried to do that for about 2 years, and it was really depressing. Let me just put it out there. Like, if anyone ever kind of, it's really easy to look at someone like me or whoever who has kind of like a bigger body of work and a longer work history and be like, man, it must have been so easy for them the entire time. You know what I mean? Like, I can't like the work is really good. They must have had work, and they must have had jobs thrown at them right at the beginning. Not the case. So I tried to find a job for about 2 years, and then I eventually ended up taking a job because I had bills to pay, and I was living with my parents in their attic because I couldn't afford to like live anywhere else. So yeah, if you're in a similar situation, don't feel too bad because these things happen. It's not necessarily your fault. But I was living with my parents, and I found a job coding HTML for a online publisher because I had done an independent study when I was in college, and I had taught myself how to code. So they were like, "Hey, can you code HTML?" And I was like, "Yes." And I said, "Can you code XML?" And I said, "Yes," but I couldn't. So I learned. I kind of lied on the interview, and it worked out fine. Like most of my job was copying and pasting code anyways. Any coder will tell you.
As far as I
So
know, it still works like this. You just go to like this one page with all the codes and you just combine it and bash it together to make
yeah,
it work.
that's pretty much what we did. We'd go through older courses we'd made, and we just kind of like steal code. Like, well, that worked fine. We'll put it here or whatever. Um, but what was really nice about it was it gave me an opportunity to practice. So for 2 years, I kind of just became like a monk or like a samurai, where I lived and I breathed illustration and concept art. I bought like a library's worth of books on illustration and concept art. Anything from like 3D Total or James Gurney I have in my collection. And I practiced every day. I'd wake up, I'd get on the train. I had a laptop with me that had a stylus, so I'd paint on the train on the way to work.
Hmm.
Then during my lunch break, I would practice. And then on the train ride home, I'd practice more, or I'd read books about doing concept art. And that was my life for about 2 years. Um, and then eventually, at some point, I don't know. I got good enough, I guess. Like I started by doing free commissions on DeviantArt. Like I was one of those people.
Hmm.
And so yeah, don't laugh at them too much because they're doing their best. Uh, so I did that for a bit, and then eventually I got really ballsy and I asked for $25 a commission.
Wow.
And yeah, and then some people were like, well, I don't know if you're worth it, blah blah blah. But yeah, I got some work that way, and then eventually it went up to $50, and I was like, wow, this is money now. I'm like actually I'm doing it right. I'm actually making some money.
Hmm.
And over time, I built up a client base, and I don't know, it kind of worked out. If anyone's curious, I mean, if you're curious to hear how I kind of did that, I can talk about it more, but I don't want to
Yeah, of
talk people's
course,
ears.
because like I guess a lot of folks in here might be a beginners, so it will be a nice
Sure.
something like this.
So here's the trick. First off, you have to be. Ooh, I don't want to sound mean. You have to be very critical of yourself. You have to be your harshest critic. This is something I tell people. I used to do a lot of tutoring, but I kind of stopped just because I got too busy. But a big problem is that people want their art to be good, but they're not willing to face the fact that their art is not good yet. So one of the problems people have is that they want to hear a critique of their work, but they don't really want a critique. They want to hear that, like, wow, this is fantastic, this is really original, this is really good, blah blah blah. But the fact is, if you're starting out, that's not going to be the case. So when I do critiques, the first question I ask the guys is, do you want a real critique or do you want a nice critique?
Mhm.
Because if you want a nice critique, go ask your mom. I'm sure she'll say something really nice about what
Yeah.
you're doing, right? You're my baby, and I love everything you do, and you're such a brilliant artist, and blah blah blah. Oh, very nice, very nice. But no one's going to hire you if that's how you're getting your critiques. So if you want a real critique, then I will be real, and I'll talk about what you're doing right when you're doing wrong. But if you're not getting work, there are only so many reasons why, and generally speaking, it's not going to be a global conspiracy to keep you from working. I know it's very tempting to think like there must be some reason out of my control that I'm not able to get a job or land a contract or whatever. Well, it's
Mhm.
probably in your control to some extent, right? So the reasons you're not getting work are your work is not being seen, and it's an exposure issue. That does happen, and that's where social media and having a web presence is really important. The other is that you're just not that good yet. Sometimes you're just not ready to get those big clients, and when they see your stuff, they're going to go, "Ooh, no thanks." So, what do you do in that situation? Well, one thing you can do is obviously you can build your web presence. A lot of people are really afraid to do that. They kind of like protect and guard their art. They don't want anyone
Mhm.
to see it because it's not as good as they want it to be, or it's not ready yet, or whatever. Well, if it's never ready, you're never going to get a job because no one's going to like. If someone asks for your portfolio link and you say, well, it's not really ready to be seen yet, well, then you're not really ready to work yet. Um, so that's one thing, and you need to actively seek out contacts and critiques. If you're lucky enough to get a critique from somebody in the industry, that's a really good way to start because they might remember you.
Mhm.
So one trick I do, and this is what actually ended up getting me work, was I I would make a list of all the companies I wanted to work for. So I just big list, write it down in a notepad or whatever, and I would apply to those companies every 6 months. You do not want to apply more frequently than that because you
Mhm.
don't want to be that guy. Uh, I've worked as an art director for let's see. Oh God, 5 years at least now.
Oh, for quite a long time.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, I've worked as an art director for a while, and let me tell you, when we review portfolios in studio, you do not want to be the guy we remember for bad things. So if you're the guy who applies every 2 weeks or every month, and your
Uh-huh.
portfolio is the same, we remember you, and we're gonna just start saying no thanks before we even look, because if you're John Doe and you send the same shitty furry art every 2 months, like we're gonna be like, oh, it's that guy. He thinks that his portfolio is good enough, and it's not.
I guess that did happen that somebody sent free art.
I mean, I've worked a couple places where they were like, even before I got there, these people had reputations. So, I would get an application. I'd be like, what the hell is this? And then somebody else on the art team who was there before I got hired would come over and be like, oh, it's whoever, it's XX Phoenix XX 3666 or whatever. And this guy applies every 2 weeks, and he never updates his portfolio, and it's his own weird OC characters and shit. So don't be that guy. Like, if you're going to consistently apply to a studio, you need to show real progress and real upgrades in your abilities between applications for them to take you seriously. Because I would get applications for people who were good, but just not quite there yet. So a good example is I had an artist back when I was working at 6 Foot, and I met him at GDC. I did a portfolio review, and I really liked his stuff. He had a really great attitude, really great personality, and it was clear that he was like hungry to work. So I looked at his stuff. He was really professional. He had a really, really good presentation of his materials, and I said, you know what? We're looking for concept artists. Why don't you apply? So he did, and he did the art test, and he didn't quite get the art test. He kind of missed the boat a little bit, missed the mark, or whatever expression you want to use. So I take the time, or like not all art directors do this, but personally, I take the time. If someone does the art test and it's clear they actually tried, like if you just fudge it, I'm not going to give you my time. But if you tried really hard, I will take the time to send you an email and explain why you did not succeed, and I'll give you points of where to improve, and what I would want to see in the future. So I did that for him, and I said, listen, why don't you reapply in 6 months? So I said, A, B, and C need to change, whatever. He worked on it. 6 months later, he applied, and I gave him the job because he took the time to learn. And like that's what I want to see. I want to see artists who take critique well, are serious about what they're doing, and work hard, because ultimately that's what I need when I'm hiring people.
And how do you approach, like, for example, when you, let's say, theoretically, you have like two artists. One is way better, like in terms of skills and everything, but for example, you do not really see maybe like a passion for work, or just you don't feel like this person will be like, let's say, fun to work with. But
oh yeah, so fit per se.
Yeah, but skill-wise is extremely good. Like for this job will be, for example, like a perfect fit and everything. And on the other hand, you will have an artist that maybe is not that good, but is like a really easy to approach, is really easy to talk with and everything. Like, how do you approach it as an art director?
So this is a multifaceted decision. There are a lot of factors. So one is like, how desperate am I to find somebody? Like, what if I have a launch date that's coming up a little bit too fast for comfort and we're behind? In that situation, I would probably have to choose the guy who's a little harder to work with, but does better work consistently, just because I might not have the bandwidth. So, like, another way of kind of answering this question is a lot of the times when you work at studios, you'll have a lot of people in QA or customer service who really desperately want to get into the art department, and they're treating their employment in customer service or quality assurance as sort of a stepping stone, right? Like, I got my foot in the door, now I can get portfolio reviews, et cetera, which is it's not a bad strategy by any means. Don't get me wrong. It's a perfectly viable strategy. I don't think it's bad at all. But the problem with that is that you need to be working somewhere that has the bandwidth to take you on and train you. Unless you're just like really baller and you just happen to work in QA, but that's rare. Usually the people who are doing that are kind of like junior level, but they have potential maybe. And in those situations, as an art director, I need to have the personal bandwidth to take on kind of like a project, for lack of a better word. But if I'm in a desperate situation, I might not be able to. So that's kind of one of the big decision makers for me, is just like, can I give the person the attention they're going to need? Because if it's a lot, I don't want to set them up for failure.
Hmm.
Um, Another decision is like, so like, let's say we don't have an exploding timeline and like, whatever, I can take somebody on. Um, I will probably, oh, my dog's going crazy downstairs. I'll probably take on someone who needs a little bit more hand holding if I think I can get a better yield out of them in the long run.
Hmm.
And I would definitely prefer to work with someone who is easy to work with over someone who is good but an asshole. Because, like, remember, I mean, you spend back when people used to go into work before COVID, you spend like 40 hours plus a week with these people. Like, do you really want to get up every morning and be like, shit, I need
Yeah,
to go
that's
in,
right.
I need to go talk to Mikey or Alex or, Laura or Stephanie or whoever it is, and just be like, every morning you walk in, you go, oh, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're still an asshole. Great. Um, Now, on the other hand, there is a possibility that that person, like just like with an artist, maybe
Hmm.
you can train them to be less of an asshole. Maybe you can coach them via one-on-ones or something. But honestly, for the most part, people. You can't expect people to change too much from the way they come to you. It's
Hmm.
not fair to them, and you're going to be disappointed a lot of the time. So in those situations, yeah, like you kind of
Yeah.
you kind of have to know what you're
I
buying.
guess it's easier to teach someone art instead of like stop being an asshole.
Yeah, yeah, I could. I mean, you can try. I have worked with all types of people, and you never know. Sometimes people kind of turn it around. Sometimes they just kind of need a chance. But yeah, a lot of the time, it's if a
Hmm.
person comes to you as an asshole, they're probably a long-term asshole. This isn't a phase or something. So you need to think about that in terms of the well-being of yourself and the mental
So
well-being of your team.
also when you were when you are an art director before like the
Uh-huh.
COVID and everything, you worked in a studio, right?
Yes,
And now everything is freelance.
yes.
How do you compare? Like, do you prefer working freelance or do you prefer to work in studio? Like,
So
how it looks from your perspective?
personally, it's a trade-off, right? So for me, I would much rather prefer not to commute. So I like working remotely. I don't have a problem with it. Honestly, in my opinion, this was an inevitable thing that was going to happen, and COVID just hastened it. I think that's a lot of things, honestly,
Hmm.
with the way COVID's worked out. But there are advantages. So team cohesion is very difficult remotely. Like if you're just kind of a chat box, you don't have that same level of attachment um, to a team member than if you go in and you're getting
Hmm.
lunch and you're doing company outings and blah 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 blah. One thing I do like is much there are way fewer interpersonal issues between staff.
Hmm.
Like someone's not going to come to you and be like, Richard's making me feel uncomfortable in the cafeteria or something because it's just text messages. So as long as the person's not being creepy via text, you
Huh?
don't have to worry about like miscommunications or awkward conversations or whatever. People tend to be a little bit better at censoring themselves when they're kind of like texting because it's right there in front of them. So I like that element of it. But yeah, overall, I it's a trade off. Like, do I miss kind of working with people and getting to know people intimately, like face to face? Yes. Do I like getting to work in my pajamas and not having to drive, an hour in traffic
Hmm.
and worry about getting into an accident or whatever? Yeah, I prefer that.
And also, I guess one of the problems that a lot of people might encounter while working like remotely from house is
Mhm.
sometimes it's really hard, or or maybe differently, really easy to misunderstood what someone meant via text because there's
Yep.
like no the face, no like gesture to it. It's really
Yeah.
easy to get something to be a
Yeah.
little bit more offensive or something like this.
Yeah. You're correct. So one thing I will say is text messaging goes both ways. You're right. So you could say something and like it could be misinterpreted. I think it's kind of funny, but I think emojis are super important
Hmm.
when you're using text messages to like. I mean, it sounds stupid, and maybe it's like boomer tech or whatever, but like using emojis are really important for conveying meaning. Like if I say to somebody like, "Hey, I hope you're having a good day," smiley face, I don't know. It's pretty obvious what I mean. But for me, the bigger issue, and this is something that I've experienced working with freelancers while I was in studios, is you can have like a conversation that takes 30 seconds, or a series of emails that takes 2 days to figure
Mm-hmm.
out the same problem. Like when I'm working with a concept artist, I can just get up from my office, walk over to their desk, and be like, no, 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 no. What I'm trying to say is this. Grab their
Yeah.
stylus, take the wheel for a second, and be like, boop, 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 and they go, oh, okay, 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 right. But when you're working with a freelancer, you're kind of like, hey, what I'm trying to say is this, and they're like, I don't understand. Is this what you meant? And now you've lost the day to correspondence and working time.
Mm-hmm.
So that is there's an efficiency thing, but honestly, I think that's a skill set that will improve in time. I think that's sort of a temporary issue. Like people are not used to talking over the internet solely, but
Yeah, that's
as they
right.
get better at it, I think it'll be less of an issue.
Especially when you have like to manage a huge group of people, because if you want to talk with someone like one-on-one on the web like we do right now, it's
Yeah.
kind of easy. But if you like have a group of 15 people, just 10 of them most likely have some problems or issues with noise and everything, then
Oh yeah.
I can imagine this being a nightmare. So yeah.
Yeah, we had some of the places I've worked, we had like literal issues with space. Like the fire marshal would be like, you can't have that many people in this space. Like
Mm.
I worked places where people were in the hallways, with their desks like facing the wall, and when you got to go to the bathroom, you walk by like 10 people in the hall. So I there are all types of problems that get removed. And I don't know, like I don't. There's something about studios that I don't like. Like something about it just feels weird to me, where everyone's in this place and they're all supposed to be acting like they're these like professional humans, but we're really just all people like who are kind of afraid and
Hmm.
where they're going to mess up somewhere. So something about not having to do that is liberating to me. I don't know. Maybe I just like to be honest too
I
much.
guess also the thing is that many artists are really awkward with like talking to each other, and
Sure.
many artists just prefer to be left alone when they are doing art or something like this. So for many people, as far as I know, and a lot of friends told me this, that they actually feel better like working in home because they can avoid all these interactions and everything, and it just feels better for them. So
That's definitely true. I mean, for me, that's kind of like a multitasking skill set, but it's definitely true. Like, when I've worked places, like we've kind of had unofficial different like modes. Like, hey, everybody, we are in heads down mode right now, where like there's a deadline coming, we all need to hit
mhm.
it. Some people are going to be working this weekend, so please be cognizant of other people's needs right now, and don't be too chatty. But with everybody online, you can just mute it, right? Oh, I've got shit to do. I'm going to mute this for a second, no problem. And then maybe you can set certain people to higher priority, like your boss. If your boss messages you directly, like, oh shit, I should probably check that. Versus whatever, in the Slack channel, someone wants to
Mhm.
talk about the new Mario game or something. You're like, dude, I do not have time to do this right now. So yeah, it does give you more axes of control, I guess, when it comes to interactions, which is nice.
And for the productivity, how do you like compare productivity in studio versus like in home? Because I can imagine working in home can lead for people to be more productive, but on the other hand, it can lead to like a really huge like decrease
Yeah.
in productivity.
I think that is entirely case by case. In my opinion, uh, that's a discipline issue more than. I mean, there's so okay. Everyone's situation is going to be different, right? If you've got 10 kids and they're like screaming and running around and
Hmm.
biting your ankles while you're trying to work, you're probably going to have a problem staying at home and getting anything done. Uh, but overall, I think outside of those extreme situations, or like you just happen to live next to a construction site or something, um, like yeah, for me, I think being home is way more efficient. I can get way more done interrupted. Also, I don't know if you've worked in studios much or anything, but studios will have like different policies. Like some places will let you like kind of listen to music, or actually, sorry, most places let you listen to music, but some places will let you like kind of like listen or watch Netflix or whatever while you're working. And for some people, that works. For some other people, it doesn't work. And instead, they just stare at their Netflix while they're working for hours. So, in cases like that, I think it's really up to the people to know what works best for them. But for me, I like to listen to podcasts or watch movies or whatever while I'm working, and it doesn't distract me. It actually
Hmm.
kind of like gives me a enough stimulation that I can stay focused, which sounds counterintuitive, but whatever. That's how it works for me.
Yeah, I got it. I have the same thing. Like if I do not have like the some dump cartoons on like a second screen, I
Mhm.
can find it really hard to focus actually on like doing. I like to have this like small kind of distraction for my brain to kind of allow me
Yeah.
to concentrate way more on on like the actual like artwork or whatever that I am
Yeah,
doing.
I don't think we're that uncommon, to be honest. You know, I had a boss at my first studio job who was like that, where you know he has to have something going on, and it was a problem for him because he's a little bit older than me, not that much older, but
Mhm.
you know, he was like, yeah, you know, growing up, people just didn't understand it. They thought that music and television were distracting, and it was really hard for me to get stuff done because I needed that level of you know, stimulation or whatever.
Mhm. And also the problem, I guess, with art is like it's not, I would say, a typical type of a job because it's not that you can start on, let's say, 1 p.m. and 9 a.m. or something like this.
Right.
Sometimes you just have these hours that you feel like working or feel like painting and whatever, and
Yeah, yeah,
really everything needs like in order around you.
yeah,
And
that's true.
also, I guess a really cool part thing in working from home that you basically have your own like computer and everything, and that you have your own environment. So you feel a bit better in it, I guess.
Yeah.
Do not feel intimidated by it or something like this. But yeah, that's really interesting. So if anyone is going to apply for a job, just podcast, I guess, will be a title for so
Yeah.
nicely. And uh, for how long you were actually like working in different studios and or
Mhm.
differently because since you're an art director for over 5 years, you prefer to work on a freelance or you prefer to work studio?
Uh, so it's a tough question. There's trade-offs for everything. Everything is, you know, kind of like give and take. I started art directing, like I said, like 5 or so years ago. I was working at 6 Foot Studios. Before that, I was working at Deep Silver Volition out in Illinois. I was a
Hmm?
concept artist level 2, I think, or something. They had like a really weird system because uh, political reasons. But effectively, they had people there who kind of were lifers. And what do you do when someone's not advancing in their career, but you need to justify giving somebody a raise?
Hmm?
So you're like, well, now you're a level 2 concept artist. And they're like, okay. And you know, we can talk in a couple of years about making you a level 3, and then you can become senior level 1, and then you can become senior level 2, and then hopefully you leave at some point. So because we run out of levels. Um, yeah, I initially got a studio job working at Privateer Press. This is a tabletop miniatures company. I was the lead concept artist on site, uh, and I worked on like War Machine and Hordes and all these other tabletop miniature games. And that's how I got into the industry, which is fitting because you know the reason I got into art was that I was, and I still am, like a big Games Workshop fanboy.
Hmm?
So yeah, like I got like my first introduction to that stuff when I was 8. I started painting miniatures when I was 8, painting like Hero Quest and Battle Masters and stuff. And I remember just being, as a kid, completely blown away by the art. And I was like, man, it'd be so cool if I could do that. And
Hmm?
you know, over the years, I practiced and whatever, and then I got really serious about it, as I've sort of talked about in 2009, 2012, in that range. But yeah, I started getting into that, and that's where I got most of my freelance work initially, was through tabletop games, not video games. Video games are much harder to break into. There's a lot more people who want to do it. The pay is higher, so that means there's more competition as well,
Hmm?
and they're less willing to take chances. Like they want people who are established. Versus with tabletop, the prices are lower for commissions. There are fewer people available. They're a little more, you know, like, well, this isn't the best, but it's what we can afford mindset going on. Um, so I started doing art that way, and this is also a good inspiration for anybody. So the reason that I had, a lot of people like will be like, I don't know if I'm good enough to do art. So the reason that I felt ballsy enough to apply for work
Hmm?
was I got this art book for this Sabretooth Games like Horus Heresy card game that came out like a long time ago, and I was looking at the art and I was like, this is not good. This is this is just not good art.
This is
And I
exactly what I thought when I first saw like the professional level concept art and everything. Like I was
yeah,
looking at it, I was like, wow, like seriously? This is the
yeah,
standard?
right. And I was like, I could do better than that. Like, am I allowed to say that? So I was like, okay. And this goes back to getting my how to get work, the little lecture I was just giving.
Hmm?
So what I did was I made that list of studios I wanted to work for, and then I just kind of would make a new portfolio every 6 months and apply, and I'd front load my portfolio with 3 pieces that were just for that studio. So like I wanted to work for Games Workshop and Fantasy Flight Games because that's who was doing the Warhammer IP at the time. And I did like 3 pieces, one of which was my Black Templar piece, and then I did like I think like an avatar fighting a keeper of secrets, and this like death cult assassin chick with her boobs hanging out. And I applied, and now I had applied before to studios. I never heard back at anything. Never heard back a single thing. I tried my new strategy where I, like, okay, I'm gonna make these 3 pieces. I'm gonna have a decent portfolio. No more than 12 pieces. I heard back within 30 minutes after my first attempt, which is not a normal thing. Like, don't get discouraged if you try this and it doesn't happen right away. But yeah, like it was such a confirmation that I was kind of like on the right path. Like I had made the right strategy in this situation. And that's when I started doing concept art. So in illustration, I started doing it for like Fantasy Flight Games and Paizo and a bunch of these sort of tabletop games. And then over time, I started doing stuff for Games Workshop and Privateer Press and Wizards of the Coast. And then I kind of got in this weird tug of war for a job between Privateer Press and Wizards of the Coast, which was the worst. This was a nightmare scenario. So I'll quickly describe it. Pretty much, Wizards of the Coast does this thing where for Magic the Gathering, they hire like a small team of concept artists, and they fly them out, and they like live in Washington, in Renton, which is where Wizards is, for like 6 months, and they just do all the concept art for a block, and that's it. It's just a 6 month long contract.
So basically, if for example they would choose me, they will like relocate me there for 6 months to just work in there for all the concept art.
Correct.
Oh, nice. That's cool.
If you do concept art, if you're doing card art, that's different. Yeah. But that's how they were doing it at the time. I don't know if that's still what they're doing, but that was their model for a long time. So I was part of a comp. It was effectively a competition, but there were like I think 13 of us, and we all knew who the others were because we were all on the same email list. So it was kind of like scary because you knew who you were going head to head with, and there were only 2 spots available. And the art director at the time was John Shindahetti. He's a really nice guy. He's a great guy, and he sent out the email, and I got it on my birthday, which is April 2nd. And I was like, oh, I'll check this out, and then like maybe tomorrow or whatever, I'll start working on it. Well, I didn't realize there was a JavaScript token built into the email, and once you opened it, it started a 24-hour countdown, and you had to start. And I was like, oh fuck! So I had to call everybody, and I was like, hey, I can't do anything on my birthday. Like we need to reschedule everything because I have 24 hours to complete this. And it was like design 3 playable. It design a playable race. Playable character race, then 3 classes for that race, then a monster, and then do 3 environment paintings in 24 hours. And I was like, all right, here we go. So I worked, and I remember I went to bed so I could get a couple hours of sleep in the morning and then finish. And my BIOS died, and I had to like hard reset my BIOS that morning. And it was fine. I ended up finishing in time. But I was like, oh man, this is like, there's no way I'm going to get this, blah, blah, blah. And it turned out I was the only person who actually finished the test. No one else was able to finish in time. But I didn't know that at the moment. So previously I've been, or I guess contemporaneously at the time, I was doing work for Privateer Press. And they were like, hey, the art director like messaged me, and he's like, hey, you've been a little quiet last 24 hours. I haven't like heard from you. I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing an art test. And by the way, Privateer Press is also in Washington. It's in Bellevue, which is like a couple towns over from Renton. And he was like, you're not doing that art test for Wizards of the Coast, are you? And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh shit, I knew it. So they made me an offer that day, and they were like, I think it was maybe it was like that weekend or something. But they're like, you need to decide by Sunday. And I messaged the art director with Wizards of the Coast, and I was like, hey, this just happened. I don't know what to do. Because he's like, well, we're not making a decision till Monday, and then we'll announce. So I was like, do I give up this job offer that's like good, or do I gamble to see if I got this contract? And I talked to him about it, and the art director was really wise. He was like, listen, this is a contract. Like, there will be more of these, but it's only for 6 months. Like, there's no benefits. 6 months of pay guaranteed, but that's it. This job that they're offering you is like a real job, so you should take that. And I was like, okay. And he's like, so do you want to resign from this contest? And I said, yeah. And he's like, well, okay, I accept your resignation, but just so you know, you were one of the 2 we were going to select. or whatever. And I was like, fuck. But either way, I mean, I still think it was the right call.
Uh-huh.
Either way, just because like I said, it's a job versus a contract. Um,
Yeah, I guess
but yeah,
if you
no,
would like to work for Wizards like later, I guess the doors will still be open because like
would
you were
think
the
that.
one.
You would think that, but he didn't work there anymore.
Uh,
So no, I've never been asked to work there. It's funny because I still know a lot of the designers who
mhm.
work on Wizards, and they have like some input into who gets to be like the artist for their sets.
Mhm.
And I've at least once been asked, "Hey, are you interested in being an artist? Because I remember working with you and I really liked your art, and blah blah blah." And I always say yes, and then I never hear back. So I don't know. I'm not sure what's going on.
Also, there's one thing that you said that is really interesting for me because you said the difference between like Illustrator and being a concept artist. And this is one of the things that was always like kind of mind-boggling for me. If you want to hire a concept artist, of course he should like or she should have some like designs and concept arts and everything in portfolio.
Yeah.
But is there a chance that, for example, you would hire someone as a concept artist who does like illustrations and everything? Because to make an illustration, you also usually need to design something. You need to like make a
Yeah.
concept for it. So how do you view the topic?
So my short answer is fuck no. They are wildly different skill sets, and this is something that
Hmm.
becomes very obvious when you start working with illustrators instead of concept artists, and vice versa. So, and I suffer from this problem too. They're separate skill sets, and you have to work on them both separately.
Hmm.
So, for example, when you are working as an illustrator, you're worried about composition, you're worried about lighting, you're worried about mood, right? You want to make sure that the piece is achieving an objective, but your objective is really to sort of like impart a feeling or describe a scene or tell a story, right? Now, narrative is very important in concept as well, but you're going for clarity. That's the ultimate goal
Hmm.
here, right? When you hand off, or at least that's what I consider it to be. And I think that the modelers that I worked with, 3D modelers, would agree. There is nothing worse than having a concept that is illegible, because it might look really dope, like, oh my god, this thing is super sweet, but it's like, it's
Hmm.
just kind of this like action-packed mess. And a 3D modeler can't work from that.
I
So
understand, but what I meant more is like not the execution level, like type of a thing. So uh, I can like I mean I understand that you cannot like really give a 3D modeler like this impressionist type of a painting where he need to basically guess what it is,
yeah,
but for the ability to design something, because I think a lot of illustrators can actually come up with a better shape and like basically better visuals because
yeah,
they, for example, can spend like 10 hours rendering like a school somewhere, so they really know how to draw.
yeah. I think I will agree with a big grain of salt, or a big asterisk next to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is that you need to find someone who understands the needs of both positions. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. For example, I do illustration and concept art, but I have found that to be a rare situation. And I'm not like trying to like toot my own horn or anything. There's just a lot of illustrators are like focused on specific things. Like for example, I prefer um, concept art as line art,
Mm-hmm.
because it's much easier to read. And this is I have found to be the case with every 3D modeler I've worked with. I don't know, and maybe I'm sure there are some out there who are like, "Boo, you're wrong," but in my experience, every 3D modeler I've ever worked with is like, we would much prefer clean a line art to an illustration.
Mm-hmm. I
Um,
guess it's easier for them to do all the splines and every
yeah.
polygons and
So
whatnot.
one thing to keep in mind when you're an art director is like you are there to serve a greater purpose. And I mean, this is true for any studio artist. Like, it's not, and I know you're not saying this, but it's not about like necessarily creating the best looking product, and that's hard to
Mm-hmm.
swallow because there are budgetary concerns, and that's where things get like really hard, and why being a manager sucks. Because you have to make decisions which like will lower the overall quality of the product, but
Mm-hmm.
make sure that it can be published. So like if I have this dope ass illustrator who can do concept art, but their concepts are kind of hard to read or cause confusion in my 3D
Mm-hmm.
modelers, and then that costs us time because we have to make revisions to the models and stuff, it's actually probably not worth using them. However, here's what I will say. So there are different types of concept artists, right? And this is really important. Just like it with illustrators, there's different types of people. So for concept artists, there are like I'd say different subcategories. You've kind of got like the first is kind of like the dreamer, like the artiste. This is the guy who creates like incredible images that are
Mm-hmm.
like have like they're like rich with history or lore, and they have like a lot of mood, and they convey a lot of ideas. And this is the kind of guy that when you have him on your team, he is not going to be creating production concept art, but he's going to be creating mood pieces that inspire and set the tone for your whole project. So these people exist. I'm not going to list them, but like you
Mm-hmm.
know who I'm talking. Like these are the guys where it's like here's the early art for Destiny or whatever, and you're like, holy shit, this looks
Mm-hmm.
wild. I want to play this game. So those people exist. But like, if I had to sit that guy down and be like, hey, can you do like some call outs on like a gauntlet design? They're gonna be like, what? Like, I don't know how to.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't even like to paint feet. Like, I just kind of blur it out or whatever. So
Yeah.
there's those people, and you need those people because they're really important for making the most badass overall feeling game.
Mm-hmm.
But then you kind of need to have like your workhorse. This is the person who is like, no offense, because I'm also kind of a workhorse. This is the person who's like maybe not the most imaginative, but they get the work done. And the work they do is clean and it can be read well. And those people are like the bread and butter because without them, you're not getting concepts. Your game is going to be a mess. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's like kind of like unicorns who are somewhere in the middle where like they're very rare. This is the person who can do like crazy everything. They're the most valuable, but they're also the most expensive and hardest to find. And there's like other kind of subcategories. I'm sure you can imagine. Like you've got the hard surface
Mm-hmm.
concept artists, you've got the character concept artists, and blah blah blah. Uh, but yeah, there are different types of artists who can do different types of roles. Just like if you were kind of building up your RPG team to go into combat, same thing. Like you need different classes. You don't want to monoclass your studio. Um, so anyway, that's kind of my feelings on it. Where it's like yes, but is my
Mm-hmm.
ultimate answer.
Uh, Also, because why I'm asking, because mostly vast majority of the things that I have ever done professionally was related to illustration and basically board games and everything, but mostly it was an illustration.
Yeah,
But since I graduated from Academy of Fine Arts in industrial design, basically I got like a formal education in design, and I never really had any problems after like graduating with basically designing something, and it did not really matter what type of a topic it was, let's say. Of course, I had like my favorite topics and everything, but when I actually started working like a little bit more, because I obviously had more time, I started getting jobs as a concept artist, while I actually had like zero concept art in my portfolio, like nothing, close to none. And while I actually started working with all the different concept artists and everything on the pipeline, the more and more I felt like actually sometimes it's more about creating a cool visual instead of like a cool design, because sometimes I felt like a lot of designs were kind of like over the top, a little bit too nice, and just like basically were all about your ability to draw and to
yeah.
like paint, not about a design, because sometimes I felt like you need to make like an uglier design, but it will be like designed this way, so kind of feel fit the overall picture.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was always kind of confusing for me, yeah,
Well,
in
to be
those
fair,
manner.
I mean, you might be a unicorn type artist. There are people who can do that, and there are people who can't. So, if anything, I would say, maybe you're more skilled than you recognize. And I mean, you deserve a little more praise than you give yourself, type of a thing, because those are not common skill sets. And that can be very strange when you're working with peers and talking about the industry and you're like, but I don't have these problems. And people are like, well, it's really hard to do
Mhm.
what I do. And you're like, oh, whatever. So yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, maybe you're just up there in terms of people who can do both. And
Hmm.
that's a really good thing to have because just like me, you can kind of go back and forth and find opportunities in both fields rather than kind of be stuck like, oh, I only do concept, I only do illustration, or I only do a subset of concept, God forbid, which is
Mhm.
actually pretty.
Yeah, because like one of the things also they taught in the school was like it's not about what you are designing, it's about how do you approach the design. So it like the topic should not really matter that much because basically it's developing some sort of a like process, design something, and what will be the outcome is basically the same thing. And for a follow-up question, what do you think on like a formal design? Because I usually see there are like two camps. One says that you do not need any formal education whatsoever, and the second says actually helpful. And maybe I am kind of biased because like I graduated and everything, but to be honest, I really feel like the formal education, especially in like a school that has some reputation, might actually be extremely important.
So here are my thoughts. I think that this is a tough one. So I think that a lot of the time, a formal education is as valuable as you make it, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So I have I have gone to school and I have worked with people who are kind of dicking around the whole time, and they don't really take advantage of what's being offered. And people like that tend to harm my opinion of formal educations because you'll have some guy who comes out of an atelier program and can't draw for shit. But he graduated from a atelier program, so he wants this respect as if he had done the work. And I can see you kind of smiling because I'm sure you know people like this. Um, Now, with that said, are there going to be advantages to going to an atelier program if you really make it work for you? Absolutely. You know, if you have a professor looking over your shoulder saying, "Oh, okay, what's mixing here is so and so," that could have saved you years of trying to figure out yourself.
Mm.
Um, and they also might say, like, "Oh, there's this one book you should read, or there's this one artist you should check out," and that kind of like shapes your entire career and teaches you something you never would have found otherwise. So, in my opinion, I think that programs are very important if they are A, good programs, and B, you are doing all of your best ability to make it worthwhile. Likewise, I'm not going to lie, because these schools can be prestigious, they often are really good for networking opportunities. You can say, like, I went to, so for example, when I was at 6 Foot as art director, I hired two guys who went to Fengzhou School of Design in
I
Singapore.
wanted to mention it.
And they're some of my best artists. But like for me, it's like it's a tough, right? Because the people who go to those programs and make it out alive are some of the most hardworking people you'll ever meet, and
Mhm.
they would have made it even if they didn't go there. Do you know what I mean? Like they just
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
accept failure. So those people, like, and I feel like I'm sort of in the same group. Like I got into a very difficult school to get into for my undergrad. It had nothing to do with art, but like I was one of those people where I just can't accept failure. So I'm gonna make it happen no matter what. Um, and I think that those people who don't have access to those programs for whatever reason, I'm not saying that like they
Mhm.
can't get in, or maybe they just can't afford it,
Yeah, like
or whatever
everybody
it
has
is.
different situations, so hard
Yeah,
to
maybe they've got a
say.
sick grandmother and they can't leave or whatever. I don't know, whatever the fuck.
Mhm.
But those people, for me, it's like it's 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 a point of interest, but not necessarily a decision maker, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
it gives me another factor in my equation, but it doesn't make the call for me. Um, like I would want to kind of like figure out what kind of person they are. I'd still want to interview them. I would assume that they're going to have certain levels of training in certain subjects, which maybe a self-taught person won't. They also, honestly, have probably been kind of like exposed to abuse to a certain level
Mhm.
that a home-taught person won't. And it's kind of dark, but that's useful when you're working in an industry, because people who have like been ground down by Feng Zhu are going to be more likely to be able to take critique well and understand what a deadline really means
Mhm.
versus someone who's kind of like, well, it's just my art, man, and I do this at home and I think it's fun, but really it's about expressing myself. Like, get the fuck out of here. I don't have time for that shit. Um, so that's sort of my feelings on it. Where there's once again, it's multifactorial. It's a little bit of give and
Mhm.
take. It kind of depends a lot on the person, but it might inform my decision making immediately. Like when I have one person from Fengzhou say, "Hey, I have a friend who's also Fengzhou, and he's one of the hardest working people there." I'm like, "Well, this guy must be a killer."
Mhm. Yeah,
And
that's
sure enough, he was a killer. He's actually a freelancer now. But yeah, like the kid I hired from Fengzhou who failed his original art test, he's at Epic now. Like he works on Fortnite. So these people, like, they're gonna, and it's funny because he thanked me. He's like, you gave me my first industry job.
Mhm.
And I said, that's true, but you would have found an industry job without me. Like, I wasn't the thing that opened the door for you. You were opening the doors yourself. I just happened to be the first door that opened.
Mhm.
So that's sort of my long rant on that, I guess.
Yeah, because also what I was wondering, because obviously like studying and everything like basically takes time, and sometimes you
Yes.
will do things that you do not necessarily see as valuable. So for me, since I was like working mostly as an illustrator and everything, I felt like while I was studying design and whatnot, those 5 years in a sense were kind of lost because I had no time to practice like my rendering and everything, just basically doing nice images and whatnot.
Yeah.
But later, when I like graduated and everything and started like working professionally, basically full time, I found out like the things that I would not even connect together that will be profitable for like the sessions and everything, all nighters that I basically have to make a project,
Yeah.
like where that was the valuable part. And after
Yes.
like finishing everything, I started to realize that okay, so those studies were not necessarily to like okay, like who cares that I was not studying game design per se, so I was like not like designing games for 5 years, like for example as you would do in Fengzu, but still there are things that are really connect they're connecting
Yeah.
together, something like this. And yeah, and like my biggest thing that I kind of come up with was those, like personally think I would not be where I am if I would not spend like 5 years in the school. Like, of course, I could maybe come up to the same conclusions and everything, but I think it will take me like much longer if I would try to do it just by myself.
I think that's probably true. There are fewer distractions when you're in a school like that because it's so intense. But like I said, once again, it's really what you make of it.
Mhm.
How long was your program? You said like 5 years or something?
Yeah, it was 5 years.
Okay. So like I had a similar thing, but it was 2 years for me. But that's because, and I was working a day job because I had to. But
Mhm.
like every waking minute I could spare was studying, practicing, and hunting down new clients. Like that's all I did.
Mhm.
Um, but like and who knows? Maybe it would have been the same for you. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have taken less time. But I definitely would have appreciated a program that was the same level of intensity that I had because it might have helped me do things faster.
Mhm. Mhm.
That guiding hand cannot be underestimated.
Yeah, because like,
Uh,
oh, okay, finish.
no.
Okay.
It's just
Okay.
that. It's just I agree overall that if you're working with professional teachers, like okay, so here's a good example. When I was tutoring, I used to get really frustrated because a lot of the time the people would come to me and they'd be like, okay, I'm willing to sign up for these, 10 sessions. I'm willing to pay you $700,
Mhm.
right? I'm going to pay you almost $1,000 to teach me. And then they'd show up and they had no hustle. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, I'm giving you assignments and you're not doing them because you just couldn't find the time. What was that $700 for?
Mhm.
Like I mean, I like money, so I'm not going to say no. But after a while, I was like, dude, you're wasting everybody's time here. Like, I'll give you my brushes, but it's not going to get you where you need to be.
Mhm.
Like that APB file or whatever it is, or ABR file, is not going to suddenly make you a profitable, working artist. There are like
Yeah.
you need to work on your compositions. You need to learn how to draw a sphere or a cylinder at different angles. I mean,
Mhm.
there were different types of artists. Some I'd work with and had like a really good foundation, and I'd be like, oh, okay. So this is really going to be a series of critique sessions. But then there are others who are like, okay, let's talk about the fundamentals. Like, what is a 3D object?
Uh-huh.
This motherfucker can't draw them. And that kind of stuff was really disheartening because I was like, damn it, dude. Like some of these people are just, that they're hurting. They want to do this so badly.
Mhm.
And then I've got this kid who can't be helped to do his assignment that I gave him for, the week. So I feel you.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Uh, and for the things, because I also wanted to ask about, not ask, but I also wanted to say, because the only time when I really like found out like one company that cares about formal education was From Software. Only in From Software I have seen that in like the requirements they wrote 10 years of, or something like this, 10 or 5 years of experience as an artist, or a degree in something
Wow.
that is related to a design, to art, and everything. And it was really
Interesting.
weird for me because like I had no idea it, like you can get a job just by having like a degree. Like, I mean, it was not like you have a degree and you get a job, and obviously
Yeah.
you need to submit a portfolio. But it was like the only time when I saw a studio listing a formal education as a possibility to like get hired. So I guess this is what you also said. Maybe they had like time for someone to just basically tutor them, because
Maybe.
they will know that somebody.
I would never accept that. For me, so the way I like to be shown portfolios and
Mhm,
resumes is I don't want to see the resume at first. I just want to see the portfolio. I don't want to know anything about this person.
mhm,
I don't want to bring any of my own prejudices or preconceptions to the door. Their portfolio will tell me everything I need to learn about this person. Um, and if I see this dynamite portfolio and I say, okay, who is this person? They go, well,
mhm.
she's an 80-year-old grandmother. She's never worked in the industry before. I'd be like, okay, well, grandma is balling, so I want her on my team. Like I don't care. So if someone's like, well, I have a degree, and I'm like, okay, well, let's see that portfolio,
Ah,
because
yeah.
that's gonna tell me what you're worth. Because if you have, like I said, like
Mhm,
I won't say his name, but I hired an artist when I was at 6 foot, and I didn't. So okay, people have mixed feelings about art tests, and I will explain both sides of the argument because I
mhm,
understand them personally. So as a concept artist or whatever, if someone says, "Well, we'd like you to complete an art test," you're like, "This is free work. Like it's opportunity cost, right? I could be working
mhm,
on another job. I could be doing outsourcing work. I could be looking for other work. I could be spending time with my family. Blah blah blah. And they're not even paying me. This is bullshit." Yes. However, when you're at a studio, you are taking a risk on everybody that you hire
mhm,
because shit like this happens. So I we had an applicant, and this guy, his portfolio spoke for him. He had worked at some very big studios on some very big projects. You know, he was a quote unquote household name in the industry.
mhm,
And I was like, oh my God, we'd be so lucky to get this person on staff. I'd be so excited to work with them. Um, I don't think we need to give them an art test because I don't want to insult them, right? Because if you're
mhm.
that good, you shouldn't need an art test, right? Your portfolio should be diverse and impressive enough alone. So we didn't give him an art test. This guy could not do art.
Hmm.
Showed up. I don't know what happened, but between working at studios, something went wrong, and he could not generate concepts anymore. And now I had this guy I wanted to be my senior or lead concept artist. I wanted him to take
Mhm,
some of the pressure off of me as the art director, and I had to get rid of him because he couldn't deliver on anything.
hmm,
So and like let's put it this way, we had to pay to relocate him. That was probably a couple grand, maybe up to $6,000.
mhm,
We had to do the paperwork to get him hired. So that means we're paying our HR people. We're setting up the ADP accounts. We're setting up the 401k accounts. We're setting up his insurance. Uh, We've also turned away other potential artists and wasted their time potentially,
mhm,
or lost them. They could find work in the meantime. Um, and I had to get rid of him. And I didn't have a choice, and it sucked. Uh,
hmm.
but I couldn't work with him. He was causing personnel problems. He couldn't do any work. It was a nightmare. It was an eye-opening nightmare.
Interesting.
So it goes both ways, which I know is hard to believe. And for what it's worth, the bigger a studio is, the more it can stomach in terms of bullshit. Like they have a bigger wallet, so they
Mhm,
can handle something like that better. But it was a blow to us. Like I had to like I had to talk to my team after and explain what happened, and I was really worried that they were going to be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this happened. This person's such a big name, blah blah blah."
uh-huh.
But they were relieved. They were like, "This guy was an asshole. He was impossible to work with, and we all felt like we were carrying his weight." And we were afraid to say anything to you because we didn't want to seem like we were complaining. But so
Yeah,
anyway, yeah,
uncomfortable position, I guess. But for me, an artist always were like, because I had like this discussion about artists and everything on many groups, and in Poland we have like some of the groups for digital painters and everything. And when there is a topic of an artist, it's like the explosion of different opinions. And how I always viewed it, viewed, viewed problem, um, was like if you are applying to a company, then they can like demand from you to make like a free an artist, because like basically why should they give you money for like making an artist where they basically know nothing about you. But if a
yeah,
company wants to hire someone, and they want to make an artist, then they should basically pay him. And I never felt like it's an insult for anyone, like because somebody might have like a killer portfolio, but maybe you just want to see like a certain skills through the
Yeah.
artist. And if it's paid, if the companies like contacts the artist, I guess then fine with it. This was
Yeah.
always my take.
Paid art
Artists.
tests are very different. Paid art tests are whatever, but like, you're effectively doing a contract with the understanding that it might not ever be used, which is fine. That's
Mm.
that's not your whatever. Um, for me, like, I am generally so as someone who has had to do art tests and had to design art tests, there are certain rules that I try to observe. Like, I don't want something that's going to take somebody more than like a couple days of work, because like it is expensive time wise. Like, they have
Mm-hmm.
other responsibilities, they have other things they need to do, and I wouldn't want to do that if I was the artist. Being empathetic, I think, is the most important thing you can do in life, let alone in the industry. So that's one thing. Uh, the other thing is, like, if they say, "Hey, how about this piece?" and it's something that, like, so for example, if I say I would like an art test of whatever, and they say, "Well, actually, I don't have a piece like that in my portfolio, but I do have this piece that I've done for a private client or is offline. Is this close enough?" That should be good for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if it is close enough and it shows they can kind of do it, then I will take that into consideration versus saying like, no, 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 you have to do an art test. On the other hand, there is a problem of people faking portfolios, just literally stealing work. Now, I do not understand this strategy, because eventually it's gonna come and bite you in the ass. Like, there's no way you're gonna start at a studio and magically be able to draw if you've been stealing portfolio pieces your entire career.
Most likely, if this artwork is good, you already saw it on our station. You know the
Right,
artist.
and I've had that happen too, where I'm
Mm.
like, oh, so you are these three people? Is what I'm gathering, because this is whose art you're stealing. So yeah, I think that generally art tests ideally can be avoided, but I completely understand the need for them. Now,
Mm.
I think you're right. The best situation is you pay for the art test. Uh, that is something that sometimes smaller studios don't have the luxury of just throwing it out there.
But I guess
But
only when the studio contacts the artist, not when the artist contacts the studio. Because like
oh yeah, no,
the
I think if you
different,
contact
yeah.
the artist, then you should not ask. That's ridiculous. That's insulting, pretty much. If you're like, we really want to work with you, great, but we want to make sure you are who you say you are. Like, what are you talking about?
So in
Uh,
here, this is like what I guess I disagree, because personally, for example, I don't know, like the biggest company ever would like contact me. They want to work with me because they, let's say, saw my work. They think it's neat and everything, but they would like me to do an art test. But it will be a paid art test because of reasons, because something
okay,
and something. So I most likely then, without any problems, will like take an artist if I had the time to do it, and I would not view it as an insult, because I can
yeah,
understand like the studio just like likes my artwork, everything, but they would like to see like a certain like skill sets they might need currently. So this is like my stance on artists.
I think that's a very good stance. I think that's a very reasonable position to take. Also, there is the chance that, like, so maybe you're working on an IP, and like, it doesn't really have some. I mean, this is rare, but it doesn't have something necessarily that has a one-to-one similar look out there. Maybe it's like a really new looking cool thing that no one's doing, allegedly. Maybe you see someone whose art looks really good and kind of fits, but it doesn't look quite on point, and the art style is really particular, and you just want to make sure that they can do it before you bring them in, because it's like, if they can't, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know. There's that possibility as well. Like, well, we've got this really weird, unique art style, and like your art style is kind of close, or we think that you might be a good fit, or blah blah blah. But we just want to see if you can, draw a person in this style or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I think that's fine. Like, I've had to do art tests like that before. When I did my art test for Deep Silver Volition, they wanted a character concept, and they wanted an environment. And for the environment, I had to do Rob Ruppel's style. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's fairly famous concept artist. He's mostly like environments, but I had to duplicate his style, And then for the characters, I had to duplicate the style of the Young Justice League animated series. So it was like two wildly different styles that had to work together. And I passed. I mean, I got the job, but it was challenging. And I get why they would do it, because this is what they were going to be working on for the next like decade or whatever. And if I can't do that, then I'm, whatever. All my Warhammer illustrations are cool and all, but they're not going to work.
Yeah, but I mean, if someone like actually knows how to draw, like has these fundamentals and everything, then I guess like even emulating the art style is not that hard. It just takes some practice, I guess, like
I
understanding
agree with
the
you.
rules,
I agree with
like
you.
the style,
Yeah,
everything. Like
that's what I had to do pretty much.
I have like one friend of mine that basically is amazing artist. He also used to teach me like when I was attending, and basically just give him something, he will like copy the style to like the smallest degree. Like you will
Yeah,
not even be able to say this something was not done like by him.
yeah.
It's basically the
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure who his work is, but I've had to do the same thing just to survive as a freelancer. Like I would be doing stuff for Fancy Flight Games, like Grim Dark 40K, and then I'd also be doing card art for Disney with like their cartoon style characters, or like drawing. Like I'm not even joking. Like drawing like Rapunzel from Tangled as if I was drawing a CG scene. Like
nice.
so, it was and then of course people were like, well, I want a portrait of like my husband or whatever, like in the
Hmm.
flower bed or something. And you're like, okay, well now I'm gonna do some photorealistic shit. Like you just have to kind of like have a mental gearbox that you can switch and be like, okay, well I'm gonna do this today. You know, I'll do whatever tomorrow.
Hmm. Yeah, and also like a cool thing about the freelance is like most likely you will get like a vastly different projects to work on and everything. And for example, what is your view? Because I can imagine when you were just starting, you had some like works that you not necessarily liked, but you simply had to do them because reasons. And how you approached those type of commissions and everything. So for example, you really prefer like drawing all the Warhammer and everything, and all of a sudden like you get a Disney type of a thing.
So this is an easy question for me. Maybe you, as a hardworking Eastern European, can understand. Uh, Work is work, money is money.
Hmm.
Like, for me, it's okay. Are they paying me? Am I happy with the rate? Then I'm going to do the art. Um,
Hmm.
there's definitely an element of me where I just kind of buckle up and do it. I have the same thing, same response where people are like, "How do you get past, artist block? Like, what if you just don't feel like working that day?" I'm like, "Well, do you
Hmm.
feel like paying the rent that month? Then you're gonna go work."
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true. It's kind of
so for
funny for
me,
the art blocks, yeah.
yeah, for me, it's not about that. It's more like, I mean, if I'm booked solid or something,
Hmm.
and someone's like, "Hey, do you want to draw like a My Little Pony piece?" Probably not. I'm probably not gonna be into it. But like, if I'm, if I need to pay the bills and someone has the right money, sure, whatever, fuck it.
Yeah, because like once I usually like to get like these weird commissions, and I remember once like a guy wrote to me out of nowhere that he wanted his anime characters where I basically have nothing to do with anime. Never had, like I don't watch it, and that's pretty much all. But I never even draw a face from anime, something like this. And he wanted me to portray his characters as like having sex on a scene.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, now I'm an SFW artist, so let's see how it
Yeah.
will work. And in the end,
Yeah.
I have to say, it was like one of the most fun commissions I have ever had because it simply was so out of my comfort zone that
Sure.
it was just interesting. And yeah, and I also learned
Yeah.
some new software using it.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand that. For me, my general answer is, "What's your budget?" So like, I remember on on DeviantArt back in the day when I was more active there, someone messaged me and they're like, "I'm really into like possession porn," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Well, so I want to draw like this, like I want you to draw this character, this like OC that I have, like being possessed and blah blah blah." I'm like, "What's your budget?" Like,
uh,
that's all I care about really at the end
for
of the day
every
when it
new
comes to shit like
fetish, I'm
that.
doubling the price.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Nice.
what's it worth it to you to get
Also,
this?
also for this commissions, it was like actually one of my smoothest commissions that I ever had because like I set the price, and he was like, okay, paid me before I even like managed to send him all the details because he knew like my email on PayPal. Like I don't know how he did it, but he just paid to this email, and money went through before I even managed to like send an invoice, something like this. And like the most no problematic commission, to be honest. So.
I've got a client who's like that right now, who's really great. I've been working on pieces for him this year, and he's pretty much paid my mortgage for 2020. And he's like that. He pays up front before I start. He literally will. I'll get a notification from my PayPal saying I've been given money, and then I'll look, and he'll have a follow-up email, be like, "I just sent you this. Here's the brief. Here's any reference images, and I'll talk to you in a week." And that's it.
And also for the clients and everything, because there's like, I strongly believe this is true. Like the bigger the client, the less basically the problems and the emails are there. So like as smaller clients have this like tendency to like send 40 emails to explain every single smallest details and everything, while big client is like, do this, and there's like a brief, and that's all. The whole thing ends on 3 emails. Stop.
Generally, yes, I think that's true. Sometimes, in my experience, sometimes with the big studios, you've got someone who's trying to prove something, and those people suck to work with. Or they're like, I'm not going to say the studio or who the art director was, but I remember I was working for a company, and they were like, no, you're working for us now, and name dropped. He's like, this is the big leagues. You've got to. And I was like, oh my god, you motherfucker! Like you're not paying me enough to put up with whatever ego trip you're on right now. But yeah, no, generally small clients will be more like hands-on, shall we say, for being euphemistic. But sometimes it's because they're so personally invested. You know what I mean? They're like,
Yeah.
like no, but like her backstory was that she was born in like the year 3065, not 3064, and everyone knows that in that generation, blue eyes were predominant. You're like, all right, I'm sorry. Like I didn't mean to step on your, your intellectual property by accident. I'll make the adjustment. My apologies. So that shit does happen. But yeah, I think overall, like when I work with Blizzard, they're very easy to work with overall. Same with like Disney is actually one of the easier clients, despite the fact that Disney has a very, very small tolerance for a deviation from the intellectual property. So like if your character doesn't look exactly like they look in the movie, it's not going to go. However, they have teams on site who will do draw overs for you. Like these are professional animators who are like, this is what Aladdin's nose looks like. And you're like, perfect. I'm going to trace that line and not touch it because that's exactly what you want, and we're all on board. Yeah.
I think this is also why, because like Disney characters are in a sense visually way simpler, but they're like designed to like smallest detail, like there's like the devil in the. While actually, for example, in Warhammer, I can imagine like really matters if like this like wax something on the armor will left or on the right, like, so many things happening.
Yeah, for sometimes. So
that the margin of error is just bigger for example, say let's stuff like Warhammer.
Yeah, I think you're right overall. Like for example, I think the best example is like with Warhammer art, you have to be correct in certain categories, absolutely. So like like you have to put the chapter insignia in the correct place on the right shoulder pad.
Yeah, but what I mean, like if it will be like 5 centimeters higher or lower, it won't make a difference that much.
Yeah, I think that's true overall. Like, so for example, when you're drawing Space Marines, you get real funky with some of the armor designs because there are so many different makes of armor. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that this is like some sort of ramshackle armor where like he's got multiple different makes kind of slapped together or whatever. So like stuff like that's okay. Or like if you just want to like design a cool Space Marine character who doesn't correspond to anybody in the lore, that's fine too because there's a lot, it's the 41st millennium. There have been 10,000 years since the Horus Heresy. Space Marines are all over the place. Not every character has their own model and rules. So if you mix up some cool guy, they're like, that's a cool guy. But like an example was like I one time was doing an illustration for Games Workshop, and I threw some Chaos Harpies in the background, and the art director at the time was like, I don't think that these are canon. And I was like, oh, they're absolutely canon. And I like typed out this like huge like nerd paragraph of like lore. And I was like, what you have to understand is, the Chaos Harpies follow around Chaos forces all over the place on the battlefield. Like they're not uniquely tied to any one deity, blah, blah, blah. So she went and checked with like the lore people, and they're like, yeah, he's right. Leave him in or whatever. So yes, there's a lot of more latitude there. But Yeah, Disney they're very specific. They really want to make sure that, Ariel looks like Ariel, no confusion. And a lot of that is just to protect their IP, just to protect their
Yeah, that's
copyrights and make sure that they have legal rights over it.
with Warhammer stuff, because also you mentioned Warhammer, and with all the Space Marine and designs of them and everything, one of the things that I extremely love about the way the Warhammer world is done, basically sometimes misinformation is canon. So basically
Mhm.
the the wrong information
Yeah.
is canon, and later they can
Yeah.
just change it because like history does it all the time pretty much. And
Yeah.
there is like this huge opportunity for them to basically change things on the fly without any problems, because basically the design of the whole game allows it to do it like
Yeah.
without any problems. So yeah, and also the second thing about the Warhammer is if someone knows the lore like really well, knows the lore, then most likely they're like a bit nerd about it. Like they know everything about
That's
it.
true.
Then
Yeah.
it's like
No,
a
that's true.
religion for.
Yep. Definitely guilty. Though I haven't played.
Okay, do you have maybe more time, or do you have to wrap everything
I
up?
can talk for a little bit more because I know you wanted to talk about NFTs a bit, and we haven't really touched
Yeah,
that yet.
because to be honest, I'm really surprised that we didn't already, because also it kind of connects to the topic of like earning money as an artist and everything, and like getting hired. Like, do you think the NFTs, and if somebody is like not familiar with the term, it basically means non-fungible token, so it's kind of a way to buy like digital original, to put it simply. Do you think like actually the big names that are selling NFTs will basically stop working in the industry because there is a new way for them to earn much more money?
Yeah.
Because for example, as we
So,
can see, Sparth like sold one of his NFTs for like $20,000 or something like this.
oh,
I do
okay.
not really see someone who, for example, can sell an original for that much money to go back to work, like to make an illustration for like $1,000. Simply
Right.
do not calculate.
Right. So that's a great question. I think I'm so bad at answering, giving like hard answers. I think it depends. So
Hmm?
I think it really depends on a couple things. The first is like, what's your longevity as an artist? So, like Sparth is pretty well known, right?
Hmm?
But this happens a lot with Magic the Gathering artists. So Magic the Gathering gives you a lot of exposure if you're a card artist, right? Suddenly your art goes from being on your portfolio to being in front of, thousands, if
Hmm?
not millions of players or whatever. So I've seen this trend happen over and over and over, and it always cracks me up. So people work on Magic the Gathering, and they start getting a little bit of an ego about it, right? They're like, "Well, I'm
You're
a
a rock
Magic the
star
Gathering
then.
artist,"
Yeah.
and they eventually say, well, this $1,000 for a card is nothing. I'm really getting taken advantage of. I'm gonna quit, and they do like these long blog posts about how this is their last card for Magic the Gathering. They've been
Hmm.
treated so badly, and blah blah blah. Then they stop working pretty much because that was where they got their notoriety. That's where they got their fame, and now they've kind of outed themselves as being difficult to work with.
Hmm.
So I think it depends. So for someone like Sparth, I think he's got such a body of work that maybe he can get away with it. I think there's going to be a large temptation for people who are smaller names to do the same and fail miserably. Where they're like, well, I've been working in the industry for 5 years now, and maybe I've done a piece for whatever big name studio, and I'm kind of a big deal. And then they sell a couple pieces, they kind of get ahead of a big head, and before they know it, they're like, shit, I can't sell these at a rate enough to sustain
Hmm.
myself. I had a little bump at the beginning, and maybe I made 10 grand or 20 grand, and I thought I was set for a while, and the trend was going to continue, but if they're not making enough NFTs, then the NFTs don't maintain value or they don't gain value. And maybe here's another problem. Maybe they're not like actively being traded, so they're not getting any royalties. So they sell every NFT, but it's not actually enough to sustain them in the long
Hmm.
run, and they need to keep working, but they're just not gaining that. They don't have that like that momentum effectively to keep it going without the studios.
That's
So I
also
don't know.
one of the things that I was thinking. It's basically the same thing as you said with the doctors. Basically, there is no open position. The doctor basically die or something. They can work for
Yeah.
like always for forever. And as far as I know, a lot of like big studios have like some of the concept artists that are they won't get rid of. They will like pay them crazy good money and everything, but they want to work with them. And what I thought, or maybe what I think the NFT kinda can do is like open up a lot of new positions available. So there will be kind of like a change in the people who are working in some places. Because, for example, like a good concept artist that is really well known in the world will simply like feel like, okay, this is new career that I can go, and it might actually open a lot of new career opportunities for like newer artists and the
Yeah.
industry.
It's entirely possible. One thing that I remember I struggled with, sort of, it was this issue when I first got started working as a freelancer. Was I was like, how the fuck am I going to compete with these other people? Like,
Mm.
I haven't worked for any big name studios. I haven't been doing it that long. I don't have the same connections they have. Like, what am I going to do? How am I ever going to get my foot in the door? And there are strategies to get around it, pretty much, is what you have to do. And maybe the NFT thing opens up a new lane of strategy. So for me, it's kind of sad, but the way I started getting work was I was reliable. I answered emails, I did things on time,
Mm-hmm.
I had a reasonable budget, and I did good work. I wasn't a big name person, but if you were an art director and you needed to make sure your project was done, I got it done. And if you reached out for a quote, or you messaged me at midnight, I would message you within 30 minutes for
Mm-hmm.
sure, and I would get back to you. And that was enough to keep me employed. So maybe NFTs do the same thing, where it's like, these people start moving to NFTs, a little more breathing room opens up for younger artists to get into the industry. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Actually, this is one of the things that I like maybe not forgot because it was previously, but one of the skills that I think every artist should have is basically the ability to like answer emails and everything. Because
Yeah,
I can imagine
100%.
there's nothing worse for like someone who is searching for an artist to wait for like
Yeah,
a response like 3 or 4.
yeah,
Did
yeah.
it happen that someone lost job because not replying?
I have stopped using artists for that reason before. So this is my philosophy. Maybe other art directors disagree, but whatever. So for me as an art director, I am somebody who has a problem and I need solutions. The problem I'm facing is that I have art assets that I need to make and I don't have them. So what I need to do is I need to find someone who can answer that problem by, making those art assets. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to look for a couple things. The first thing I want to look for is someone who has a portfolio that matches the art assets I need, because then I have a better chance of finding that person who is going to do what I need them to do. Um, and yeah, someone who answers emails and is diligent and on time, that's a lot of points for me, because when shit gets real, or, we're getting down to the wire or whatever,
Hmm?
that person's reliable. And reliability is one of my favorite attributes in human beings, let alone artists. And a lot of artists are not reliable. They, flake out. They say that they're not in the mood for it, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
Oh, well, this came up, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, I don't have time for that. So for me, yeah, answering emails was a strategy that worked for me, but really it's something I look for in artists as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Everything is really interesting because like I knew who you were working with, but I
Mhm.
did not know that that you are an art director, and I was not expecting to. Maybe it will sound kind of bad, but I was not expecting the whole thing to be as knowledgeable as it is,
Oh, that's okay.
as far as hard to express what I think.
It's
Uh,
a unique skill set, or no, sorry, it's not a unique skill set. It's a unique perspective that very few artists have the opportunity to get, which is both sides, right? You're the guy giving the work and the guy getting the work,
mhm. Yeah, right.
and that's very uncommon.
Yeah, uh, so I guess we are soon will be closing because it's over like soon it will be hour and a half. So I
Yeah,
only
yeah,
have like some like way simple questions just to
sure,
basically for the audience and for myself to know you a little bit more personal.
absolutely.
If you could tell who is your biggest inspiration at the moment for art, or was the biggest inspiration for art?
Jesus, that's a tough question. I'd say
Okay.
my biggest initial. So I'm so basic and so easy to predict.
Huh?
So my biggest inspirations when I first started were Adrian Smith.
Mhm.
and Karl Kopinski,
Mhm.
because they were the Warhammer 40K artists at
Yeah.
the time.
The
And I
Titans.
was like, this is incredible. And so there's all the art I was looking
Mhm.
at. I actually had the chance to meet Carl, but it was really awkward. Like, I I went, so I was at a, what was it? I went to the Massive Black conference in like 2013 or 2012,
Mhm.
which, no offense, was a kind of a waste of money, in my opinion. Sorry, Massive Black. Um, but uh, Carl and his brother were doing talks, and his brother's also a very good artist. And it's funny because if you ever ask him about, his name's Stefan. If you ever ask him about Carl, he's like, "Oh, Carl's the
I
artist. I'm
always
just like."
wondered if they are related to each
They
other.
are.
I
Yeah,
never
yeah,
found any information about it, so thank you for
yeah.
confirming
They
they
are
are.
they
Yes.
are siblings. And what's
Oh.
hilarious is that, like, so Carl is like a hardcore, like, trained artist. Like, he did like Napoleonics and
Mhm.
oils and stuff. And from what Stefan described it as, is he like kind of needed a gig, and Carl's like, "I'll teach you to paint," and that's how he started working. And if you ever ask him, he's like, "No, no, no. Carl's the artist. I'm just like here for the money or whatever."
Oh.
They're both really nice guys, but unfortunately, Carl's talk was like not sold out, but it was like full. So I went to Stefan. I talked to him for a bit. He was really nice, and then like I was able to like kind of like make eye contact with Carl and be like, "Ugh." And then he like kind of like shrugged and was like, "I don't know," and then he got like whisked away by the Massive Black team, and that was
Uh,
it. And I was like, "Oh no."
it's also
Uh,
really easy to get starstruck. Like I always thought that I won't get starstruck, but when on Promised Land I met Furio Tedeschi,
uh-huh.
I was like preparing myself mentally for like 10 minutes to like approach him, and when I did, they basically stopped smoking or like drinking in the circle they were in, and he just went away, and I was like, oh my god, I totally blew this opportunity. So yeah.
So here's my thing. This is my general message for anybody. Uh, when you, how do I say this? So you have to. I don't like to have heroes. So like I didn't. To
Mhm.
clarify, I didn't get starstruck by Carl. I was like, I want to talk to you and express how I feel and get insight on things, but like there's like a physical distance between us, and you don't know who I am, and you're like, who's this weirdo in the crowd who's like
Who is
trying
like
to talk to me?
watching me like
Um,
from the distance?
yeah, and like but so I found very early on it's very important to kill your heroes, like mentally. Obviously, don't go
Mhm.
stalk them.
Yeah.
uh like, so the reason you do this is, for one, if you think that this artist that you admire is like this god, you will never be able to be as good as them,
Hmm.
because you're always going to think it's something that is inherent to them and not a skill set, right? So this is like kind of like the whole skill versus talent conversation.
Hmm.
So like talent is your natural ability to do stuff. Skill is something that you've practiced and learned over time. And what you have to understand about these people is that, aside from a very distinct few who are like idiot savants or autistic, or have some sort of built-in power, like these people all had to practice and had to learn.
Hmm.
And it's just important to keep that in mind, because otherwise you're going to be like, I could never do that. Like, I can't be a Blizzard artist. Those guys are all born like that. Spoilers, they're not. Just keep doing what you're doing, keep grinding, and eventually you'll get to that level. Is my message
Yeah,
regarding
the
that.
cool thing is like they are people after all, so it's like
Yeah. Oh,
in
and
the
that's another
end
thing.
nothing really special is about them.
Yeah,
They
they're people in the end, and they
yeah.
will disappoint you. If you think that they're going to be like super cool, they might not be super cool. They might be super assholes,
Yeah.
and you're like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I liked your work for this long. Like, you're the worst people I've ever met. That's happened too.
uh,
Obviously, I won't say who, but yeah, you'll meet an artist and be like, wow, this guy's so great, and then it turns out that they're like a sexual predator or some other monstrous thing.
yeah.
I kind of wish you
I
didn't.
wanted to ask a simple question and it turned out to be a tough one. So for definitely a simpler one, like
Huh?
your favorite animal or what your dog breed is in your house?
Oh, okay. So I'm a big fan of cuttlefish. I like octopods in general.
Uh-huh.
I think they're really. I'm actually kind of having a personal crisis where I can't decide if I will eat octopus anymore, because I just think they're so cool and they're so intelligent, and I feel kind of bad. Like, I'm not a vegetarian or anything. Like, I
Hmm.
eat meat and I keep chickens. Like we have chickens in our backyard and we get eggs in the morning and stuff. But yeah, I just kind of feel bad because they're so intelligent, and
Hmm.
it seems fucked up to eat them when they're like, like trying to communicate and stuff, and you're like, oh, hey, little guy, and like fry them up. Dog breeds, I am a poodle guy. I have two poodles. Their names are Elliot and Teddy. They're miniature poodles, and they're very easy to take care of and clean up after, so that's why I like them.
Also, for everybody who is watching, one of the things that I always really liked about like having Nicholas in my friends list on my feed, sometimes all of a sudden will show up a watermelon or something like this, and there will be like homegrown watermelon or like eggs
Yeah,
that like
that's right.
it
Yeah,
did.
like I think a couple days ago I posted, I was like, eggs that I got from my backyard
Yeah,
because
and
there's
I
just
was like always like this is so extremely random. Like I was just sitting watching art, reading some like shit posts and everything, and all of a sudden like eggs, watermelon,
yeah,
my
eggs,
new like
peaches.
things that are growing. Like oh, that's really cool. Actually,
Yeah.
after seeing your um, some gardening type of a thing, I don't remember what it was, some herbs, I guess. I went to the shop and bought uh, basil, and it's still
Oh
alive
yeah, yeah.
in there. I'm extremely bad with it because it's like all dried up and everything, but it's still alive somehow. But it was like
I
one
have
of
like
the
four
things that
basil.
okay, I need to do something like this. It's really cool. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm becoming a weird reclusive guy, and being able to work remotely is really good for that
Mhm.
if you're a weirdo. Because I like to have a farm, or I like to have like a like a garden, and I like to keep animals that
Mhm.
produce food for me, and hoard ammunition and be a weirdo. So I'm just kidding about the ammunition, but yeah, like I kind of don't mind not having to go in and see
Mhm.
people and explain my weird behaviors as much. It's nice being
And
remote.
the last question from me for today, because on Facebook you also have like Mikołaj Kwiatkowski. Is your
Yeah.
full name or?
So my dad is actually a Polish immigrant,
Oh,
as is my
cool.
grandmother. So I was raised bilingually at first, and I've lost most of my Polish abilities since, especially
Oh,
since I haven't been to Poland for.
yeah,
I
because
think the last time I went was to see my grandfather before he died in Warsaw.
mm,
So yeah, I used to go to Poland. I think I've been there like 2 or 3 times now, and I used to be completely fluent when it came to listening but not speaking. Um, but yeah, I always kind of leave that up there because I have some Polish relatives and stuff who try to stay in touch.
so if I say something in Polish because I am from Poland and this was like the thing that I was not really sure about, like should I write to you in Polish language or English language, is the
If you
Nikkei.
had written me in Polish, I would have had to call my dad and be like, "Can you help me translate this?" Because
Nice.
I'm illiterate in Polish, for what it's
Okay.
worth.
Yeah, because like I was okay, maybe Nikkei is like the artistic pseudonym or something like this, because Mikołaj Kwiatkowski might be a bit hard for like someone abroad to like write down. Like for me, when I say to someone like my name is Eric Szczygieł, it's for them impossible to pronounce or to write it down. So
So
yeah.
what happened was my grandmother, when she came here, she's a dentist, or she was a dentist. She's retired, obviously.
Hmm.
Uh, Effectively, when she was getting her doctoral, her dentistry license, they were like, "Do you want to keep Halina Kwiatkowski, or do you like people find it hard to look you up, blah blah blah. If you change it to K, it'll
Hmm.
probably be easier for you." And she's like, "Well, K it is then." So that's how we lost
Yeah,
our
that's
last
fine.
name.
This is
Became
also
K.
the reason why I'm using like a pseudonym the web, because like Szczygieł is impossible for anyone to write or
Yeah, yours
pronounce.
is hard for me, and I can usually read Polish last names. But yeah, yours is a lot of consonants very close
Hmm.
together.
Even the problem with like making the L letter,
Yeah, I always
like,
that's a weird one for most people because I'm like it's not an L, it's like a W-ish sort of
but the
sound, like
funny
a L.
part is everyone who tries to pronounce L basically is
Mm.
saying it like they have not installed like a proper like, Polish pack. Like they cannot pronounce this. It's always L without
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. For Westerners, that's a
Yeah.
hard one.
So this is all from me. Thanks for awesome talk, for a lot of great knowledge and everything. So
Absolutely.
yeah, this was like a real pleasure and honor that I could have you in here.
Thank you
And
for
I
having me.
hope you enjoy the live stream, and I hope everybody who watched learned something. I will link everywhere later, and
Yeah,
if
bid on my NFTs.
yeah,
Give me some
the link
cash.
is down in the description below. Now is everything working, because some links are not working for me anymore. I don't know why, but now everything should work. So thanks once again. I hope you had a great time, and thanks for the school. And yeah, that's all. And it was a
All
pleasure
right.
to meet you. So
Yeah, you too.
yeah,
Thank you.
so I'm ending the stream, and goodbye, everyone.